Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's edition of the Seven Investing Podcast. I'm Seven Investing founder and CEO Simon Erickson, and today we're going to be talking about esports. We have seen a transition of gaming from upfront console game sales to online and on mobile devices, and a further movement today to esports. And I'm really excited to welcome my guest today. Chris Buckner is the co-founder and the CEO of Mainline here in Houston, Texas, joining me on the Seven Investing Podcast this afternoon. Hey, thanks for being here, Chris.
Hey, thanks for having me. Good to see you again. I'm glad I could join today.
Chris, I always like chatting with you. You're really upfront and center about what's going on in esports out there. But I've got to start at the 10,000 foot level because I think that there's a little bit of a misconception of the difference between just online gaming and then what we know as esports. Can you kind of start me off by defining what esports means to you?
Yeah, sure. So it's funny. We do a lot of panels and such. And the first thing I always start off with when we're doing a panel about kind of more of like an intro to esports is the difference between gaming and esports. And gaming is a $160 billion industry right now. It's insanely huge. And that's just like you talked about, buying consoles, buying games, buying skins in a game, microtransactions. Some of these games now have subscription models to them. That's the gaming industry. It's more about like playing either individually or with your friends. Where it takes the step over into esports is when there's a competition piece included into what's going on. So that means things like production and broadcast, prize pools, franchise leagues. If you're looking at Riot has the LCS League, which is a franchise league started by Robert Kraft. You've got Blizzard with the Overwatch League, OWL, which is a franchise model league. That's the esports industry. It's more of a professional competition-based gaming industry. And that alone is a $1 billion industry to date, but that's expected to grow pretty significantly just in the next 3 to 4 years as well.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit more about where the money's coming from. You mentioned that gaming is a $160 billion industry. I know that's kind of transitioned from upfront game sales to kind of what we've seen as in-game transactions, right? It's usage-based, buying skins, you're buying things within the games itself. You've mentioned before that a lot of esports, this billion-dollar industry today, is from sponsorships or advertising. Is that how you kind of envision this industry progressing, or is there going to be more elements that are going to be more like in-game transactions like the rest of the gaming industry?
Well, so that's great. So I don't think there's going to be much more in game. Right now, 60% of the esports market is driven by sponsorship and advertising. So roughly 641 million of that $1 billion is coming from endemic and non-endemic brands. And the really exciting thing for somebody that's in the space, like Mainline, is the fact that the non-endemic brands, okay, so endemic is your keyboards, your mice, your headphones, your computers. That's endemic brands like Dell with Alienware, HP Omen, Logitech. Those are endemic. But once non-endemic brands started getting into the space, and I'm sure people have seen things like Chipotle is huge in the space. Obviously, Mountain Dew, Coca-Cola, Audi. When those brands started getting involved, I mean, a huge uptick started happening because they were supporting this industry. But, in the future right now, the second highest revenue stream, if you will, in the esports space is the media rights. Like these are important when you start talking about things like linear broadcasts, even OTT, over-the-top streaming services, the media rights that are involved there from, say, a publisher giving them rights, or even the media rights of maybe a multimedia right holder, a value-added reseller. And then after that, you've got publisher fees because the publishers own the game titles. It would be like if the NFL somehow owned the entire game of football. That's how the esports industry works. Riot owns all of League of Legends. I mean, they have ultimate control. Same thing, Blizzard with Overwatch. That's how this stuff operates. So sometimes in the share with the publishers, then you have things like that are growing rapidly with the team's merchandise and ticket sales is really big. For instance, I want to say TSM or 100 Thieves, they make a lot of money as an organization from their merchandise sales. In fact, one of those, and I don't want to misappropriate, but one of them actually makes more from their merchandise sales than they do from content or even winning their tournaments, if I'm not mistaken. So that's coming. And then you've got obviously the streaming stuff in the future. But I think you're going to see media rights kind of going up, but sponsorship and advertising is going to continue to drive this for as long as I can possibly see into the future.
That is so insightful. I might watch and rewatch that a couple more times just to get my head around everything that you just said. But let's double click on the publishers that you just mentioned. You know, Activision and Riot Games kind of having ultimate control over Overwatch, over League of Legends. A lot of this is based on franchises, right? A lot of these games were the same ones we were chatting about a couple of years ago when we last spoke.
Yeah.
Do you think that esports is built around those franchises where they just keep getting better and better and more players play them? Or do gamers want something brand new that's kind of hot and fresh?
That's a great question, because there are very two clear sides to that story. So when you look at what Riot has been able to do with League of Legends is the largest esport in the world. There's not really much of a question behind that. And they have been around, oddly enough, one of the longest of any of the major titles that you can even name out there. And what they've done is, through their patches, they've been able to keep the game fresh, and they constantly are trying to improve the experience, improve the gameplay, to like you just talked about, almost like having a fresh experience, but with a recognized and already established game title. They've done an amazing job. Blizzard, with Overwatch, they saw a dip, and Overwatch 2 is the next big discussion point, and they saw a little bit of a dip, and now their viewership is going back up. They're kind of like in that middle space. But then you have these flash in the pan titles that are going to be coming and going for forever. It's kind of like it's just cyclical with some game titles. But you still do have like your monsters in the space, right? You've got like your Call of Duties, your obviously Overwatch, League of Legends, Rocket League is, and we tend to play in the college space. Rocket League is really exciting for the college space because it's not a first-person shooter, and if you're talking about tying your tournaments to the brands of the schools, some of them may not want a first-person shooter, and don't get me wrong, Overwatch and League of Legends are still the biggest probably in the college space from a what's called the chapter level. But there's still like the ones that everybody knows. But Fortnite, even though most people don't consider it an esport because it doesn't have like custom observers and there's a lot of different reasons that they want it to be more of like that game because they care about the microtransactions, whereas some of these other groups really like the esports side of it. I think you're going to see, almost a 50-50 deal where 50% of these long-term game titles that are putting out new patches, they're going to have staying power. And then you're going to see, new titles that come make a splash. And some of those will definitely stick around. Some of them may go by the wayside a little bit quicker. There's one right now, and I'm totally going to give them a shout out because I'm friends with their founder and he's just a really good dude. But Splitgate is a super interesting title right now that's looking to make an esports push, and which is a mixture of Halo and Portal. But like that's a title that is starting to see like really significant like hockey stick growth in terms of concurrent playership. So they're just getting into the esports space pretty seriously. So that's a title to watch to see like let's see if they have some staying power for a long time. But yeah, so I don't have the answer except. Other than I have the answer that there are going to be the ones that stick around, and then there are going to be the ones that kind of come and go. So it's going to be kind of fun to watch. I mean, it's the good news for my company is we're agnostic. We game title format, none of that matters. We can handle it all. So I get to sit and watch and be like, great, all of the more the better. So hopefully that answered your question. All right.
Yeah, and just one thing I wanted to double click on is there lock-in for the games themselves with the players? You mentioned Halo, you mentioned Overwatch, Fortnite in there too. Those are all first-person shooter games. Can someone who's playing one of those games easily adapt to playing another game, or do they kind of lock in that that's the one that they go to all the time?
Well, League of Legends is a MOBA, so like a MOBA is a certain type of game title where it has very, very, very specific strategies that don't really kind of carry over to other game titles. Whereas, just like you talked about those first-person shooters, whether you're doing Counter-Strike, Call of Duty, Overwatch, even all of these first-person shooters, I would say that there is some carryover. There definitely are pro players that can play multiple titles. Like PUBG was one of those game titles a couple of years ago right when it was coming out of beta, a lot of players from things like Counter-Strike, Call of Duty, even Rainbow Six were kind of finding their way into it because it had a natural feel similar to what they had. Because they were using, by the way, a lot of these are using Unreal Engine as the mechanism. So it adheres to the same like gravity restrictions. It adheres to the same, kind of damage. And I'm doing a terrible job of kind of explaining that, but there's definitely carryover. From my limited expertise in that space, I'm not a gamer, except for I am fantastic at NCAA football, which isn't around anymore. There is some carryover specifically on the first person shooter. I think that some of those other game titles, obviously, it's much harder. I mean, we always say that League of Legends is the most endemic esports game title because the level of effort needed to become a pro player with League of Legends is monster. It's also why it leads to a great experience for viewers because it's the cream of the crop, the best you've ever seen. People that play the game go, oh my God, that person's so much better than me, right? It's just like NFL players versus me playing in the backyard. So I think there is some carryover. Obviously, first-person shooters probably being the strongest, and then some of those other game titles that have very specific strategy points are a little bit different.
Yeah, and are there any of the publishers that you think are really, really doing a good job in focusing on the esports opportunity? I know Activision's taking it very seriously. EA's got a lot of sports games. I mean, are there any publishers that you think are really knocking it out of the park with esports?
Well, so without question, I would say Riot esports is one of their most. I mean, don't get me wrong, they do very well outside of esports, but they have a phenomenal esports presence. I think you can tell Blizzard is with their franchise, the backing that they received from franchise owners, the franchise with Robert Kraft at the beginning, they are very serious about esports. And then I can tell you this, EA with FIFA and with Madden, they're taking it pretty serious too with things like EMLS, and then what Madden is doing, not just in the pro space, if you will, but Madden's even getting into the college space. We ran the Madden Collegiate League officially with EA last fall. So they're doing a great job. I think Psyonix is doing a great job with Rocket League, which is, I know Psyonix is technically owned by Epic. But a lot of this is still pretty new. Again, since I'm in the collegiate space, it's very, very new. I'm trying to think of who else is just doing. I mean, Call of Duty has always had a great presence there as well. Halo's getting ready to make a pretty big push into the esports space, but I would definitely say you got your Riots and your Blizzards like all the way at the absolute top of like putting not most of their attention, but significant attention to their esports.
Let's talk about collegiate level now, Chris. You went to A&M, I went to UT, both big schools here in Texas, both big football programs. We got pretty excited about the football games on the weekends out there.
Yeah.
But I know that you all are now partnering with Mainline with a lot of universities, right? Including UT, including A&M, including LSU. There's quite a list that you've done.
Yeah.
Tell me about how universities are embracing esports, the scholarships and the things that they're building out for this.
Yeah, so it's really, really exciting because we started in the college space. That was our spearhead, right? Was college. Now we're moving into working with major brands, and we're also working with high schools in space as well. But in the college space specifically, a lot of these colleges, 300 colleges now offer scholarships for esports. Like that's insanity, and it's only growing really, really quickly. I mean, just a year ago, it was only 170, I believe, that offered scholarships. And you look at Michigan putting in $4 million through a donor into their esports programs. You look at Ohio State that has invested over $10 million into their facilities for esports, their programs. I think what we're seeing is the very, very early stages of these universities using their brand to recognize collegiate esports as a sport. It's still a challenge because right now you could name 5 schools and all 5 different house their esports into different areas. So student activities, rec, athletics, communications, like they just all have been operating on their own through different organizations on campus. So it's a challenge because Mainline just wants to be a back-end software. Literally, we don't even care if anybody knows our name for the rest of eternity because we just want to be the highway that everybody's using. And the publishers really, really like the individual schools running tournaments, even if they're at a community level and not a varsity level, because that brings attention, but it helps grow their club programs at the school level. So I think we're right on the very beginning. I mean, we're trying to lead the charge on this. It's difficult, but you work with these brands, the IP marks of the schools, some of them wanting to run it through athletics, some of them wanting to run it through something else. Now we just want to be there to support. So it is exciting when you get to see for the first time ever, the biggest brands in all of college putting their brand next to like an esports tournament. We've got a ways to go, but I think we're right at the very beginning of that hockey stick as well.
Now, my Longhorns are following your Aggies into the SEC. At least that's for football games I'll be watching. Is it still conference-based for esports tournaments? Do you still have SEC and Big 12, or is it just everybody can play against everybody?
I mean, we've been fortunate enough to run, like we ran Big 12's Madden tournament last summer. We've run A10 MAC. I think we've run something like 11 conferences. The truth is there are multiple leagues in the college space that kind of operate on their own. What's happening right now is the college space is kind of like the PGA, right? The PGA Tour. You've got the PGA Tour, and then you go play in the Masters, and then you go play in the Players Championship, and then you go play in, and so there's not like a consolidation event yet where that's happened. Now, don't get me wrong. I think that's what needs to happen. I'll really quickly give you a perfect example of a challenge plus an opportunity is League of Legends is an amazing collegiate esport. I believe they have over 430 chapters right now. Well, they obviously have their open qualifiers, if you will, at their chapters. So the chapters determine who their representative is going to be as like their varsity team. However, through the conferences, that can be used as a closed qualifier for a national champion. So let's just take Overwatch. The schools would determine out of their 400 chapters who the varsity team would be. That varsity team then plays in conference championships. The conferences have their winners, and then the winners move on to play each other in the finals, for instance. And so I could see that playing out. Now, remember, the conferences would get their chance to have their brand associated with it, but the national championship would be like the Overwatch national championship, just like there's a Masters, the League of Legends national championship, just like the Players Championship or whatever it might be. So in a dream world, it would be great if it just operated like that. But right now, some people like CSL, for instance, CSL, largest collegiate league, they just partnered with NACE, the largest governing body. They're not, I don't think they like to be called that right now, but they are kind of like a governance group. They partnered together, shamelessly, I'll say they're doing it on Mainline software, but what they're doing is they're running 8 different game titles, and then they run open qualifiers, closed qualifiers, and championships on their own in the space, and that's very common. So I think everybody is kind of looking to see, like, how is this going to go? Is it going to run through athletics? Is it going to run independently? Is it going to run through student activities? Is it going to run through like STEM or more education based? We're still in those early stages of where it really is going to live, but we certainly have had experience more on the athletic side with conferences, with the individual schools, the rights holders. Those types of things have been the way that we got in so quickly to the market.
One of the things we spoke about last time we chatted was the average baseball fan is around 60 years old.
Yeah.
What do we know about the demographics of the audience who's watching esports? I assume it's younger than that.
Yeah. So it's kind of funny. We've been doing a bunch of research, and I'll give them a shout out, AGC Partners, which is a guy named Nate Hennings has helped me come up with some of this research, but it's shocking. I mean, I'll just give you a few stats right now. I just happen to have it on my computer, but the average viewer's age is almost a decade younger than its closest neighbor, which is the NBA. So right now, the average age of an esports viewer is 32 years old, whereas the NBA is 43, and baseball is.
Oh, Chris, we lost you just for a second on the connection. Chris, I apologize. We lost you. You got me now? Saying something about the average age was 32, and then it cut out for a minute. I think you said 43 for NBA.
Yeah. Am I good? Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Apologize for that.
No. I think it's probably me. But 32 average age for esports viewers in esports. NBA 43, baseball is 59, and you start to see why sponsorship is such a big part of esports. That is an extremely attractively young demographic of affluent game players. And this is one big stat that it was shocking. 78% of regular esports viewers are under the age of 36. So, that's just a crazy attractive demographic when it comes to sponsors and advertisers, for sure.
And let's talk about the broadcasting element of this too, right? Like we've seen Ninja become kind of one of the biggest live streamers out there. Used to be on Twitch, I think, as the publisher for broadcasting, but then he switched over to Microsoft and signed a contract with them to stream there as well. He is not only playing the games at the same time that he is broadcasting what he's doing to teach people about what he's doing during the games. It's like LeBron James would be talking directly to the audience as he's driving to the hoop for a basketball game.
Yeah, it's, so there's a difference. There's competitive gamers and then there's streamers. So don't get me wrong, Ninja is a phenomenal competitor. He's one of the best for, Fortnite, for instance, is his big one. But he is in it for the his presence, like the streaming side of things, building a brand. He's all about that. And so, he was on Twitch, and then he got, massive contract with what was called Mixer, which was Microsoft's OTT. And so there's a separation of streamers who are building a brand. They're a personality. Sure. Do they do competitive esports events? Absolutely. But I would almost say most of them probably aren't the best players in the entire world. They're just really, really engaging. And they happen to be the best players in the world. They're just not the best player in the world, for instance. So it's just it's interesting because you can be a pretty good player, but if you have a great personality, you can make a lot of money streaming. And I mean, a lot of money. Whereas you go look at these pro sports or esports organizations, they don't even make most of their money from their prize pools because they're creating content and then they're selling that content to sponsors and advertisers and that kind of stuff. So it's pretty interesting, the differences in how that pro esports space works between streamers and active competitors.
And I think that answered my question, Chris, is that you've got streamers, which are more of the personal brands people are wanting to sponsor because they align with Ninja or whoever the personality is, versus esports, which is more of the competition, the tournament, the bigger picture of what's going on. And that might attract a different type of sponsor. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm sure there are definitely some professional players out there that have an amazing presence and brand. So I'm sure there's plenty of them out there. I just know that a lot of times it's a little bit more separated, brand and then competition.
Perfect. Yeah, that makes sense. I wanted to talk a little bit about China. China has now instituted a policy that its youth, China's a huge market for gaming, but now they're saying only 3 hours a week for video games during the week. Is this going to impact the gaming industry, and is this going to impact the esports competitiveness?
Yeah, I think that it's a temporary deal that they're doing right now. I guess you can call it rumor. It's been reported, but I still think it's kind of a rumor. Is the impact behind that is there is such a gaming presence in China that it's actually hurting their traditional sports growth. A lot more younger individuals are actually doing gaming because of if you think about it, you can make money earlier than you ever could in pro sports. You have probably a longer shelf life in terms of not getting injured. You can still get injured in esports, don't get me wrong. You get these huge sponsorships. You can retire by 25. There's a lot of things in esports that are extremely attractive. And in China, it's just such a big part of their culture. Really, Asia in general has an unbelievable presence. But I think it is a temporary deal that they're doing over there to try to just kind of like take a step back and see like, okay, how is this affecting? I have some conspiracy theory deals behind that, why they did it, but it's certainly going to, look what it did to Tencent's stock prices over there when it was announced. Tencent is probably the biggest player in the entire esports space when it comes to their ownership of things like OTT themselves. I think it's a temporary deal. I think that they really are trying to figure out like how it's affecting their traditional sports. So I could see that bouncing back. I think they'll still have some restrictions. It certainly is affecting the market. Do I see it coming to the United States anytime soon? No. But let's be honest, U.S. gaming is still a couple of years behind. Asia, Southern Asia as well, their gaming is quite a bit ahead. Like Korea, holy crap, South Korea, their gaming is unbelievable, right? And some people say, they make the joke that US is 5 years behind them. I don't think it's that drastic. So yeah, it's affecting the market. I just think it's a temporary deal.
Chris, I've got two off the wall questions for you. Well, I have a chance to chat with you here. I always like to ask some fun ones as well. The first one is, we talked about South Korea, we talked about China, we talked about US. Do we ever see an esport recognized as an Olympic event? And if yes, what year does that happen?
Yeah, so in April of this year, it was almost officially announced that 2024 would be the first year that esports were in the Olympics. However, just a couple months ago, they came back out and said, it's probably going to be 2028. And the reason behind that is they're still trying to figure out, the impacts of restrictions to younger demographics, the age range of these esports athletes. I mean, think about it. You saw in the Olympics this year, a 13-year-old medaled in skateboarding. So that's great news for esports, because you can make the argument that some of the best athletes in the entire world at certain game titles are in the 15-year-old range, So they're doing things like, how are you going to qualify? Unfortunately, just like traditional sports with maybe steroids in esports, there is cheating. So what you have to do is you have to make sure that you have any type of qualifying events have to be held on site with the same exact hardware, software, blah, 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 so that everybody knows exactly what's being used where, so there's no cheating during the qualifications process. So, I think they're still figuring stuff out. They did say that there is a chance it could be in 2024, but I think everybody kind of is like, man, it's probably going to be 2028. But I mean, hey, I'll take it. 2028 is far away, but at least it becoming an esport, talk about validation, right? And becoming an Olympic sport.
Absolutely. And Chris, I know that you spoke at an esports summit earlier this morning. You were giving a presentation on unlocking the value of esports. My second off the wall question for you is, can you describe what a watch party is like when you're watching esports as part of a group?
Yeah, we weirdly enough, we got our start in 2017 when we launched Mainline by launching the first ever watch party for the Overwatch League when it launched. The Houston team, which is the Outlaws, we launched a watch party at a empty warehouse next to our offices here in Houston. And when I say an empty warehouse, I mean a abandoned, like scary, it might get tetanus at any turn warehouse. And we went and got a movie theater size screen. We went and got professional AV, and then we prayed that we could get 75 people there. I mean, we were praying. And we ended up getting over 700 people showing up for this event. And you can, if you type in Houston Outlaws watch party, I think it's the first image. It looks insane. It looks like an actual, like at a college football game, student section. It was insanity. And what's funny is Overwatch was fairly new to me at the time. I had never played it myself. And to watch these people going nuts, I'm watching the screen and I'm going, I don't know 100% what's happening here, so I need to learn pretty darn quickly. But they were cheering. We did have free beer, and that was that helps a little bit in this. But it was wild. It was just like sitting in the student section of like a college basketball or a college football game. It was nuts.
And we know that you're based in Houston, but for anyone in our audience that wants to learn more about Mainline, where can they find out more about your company?
Yeah, matter of fact, we just, because of the summit, we launched our new version of our website today. It's just mainline.gg. You can go on there and obviously contact forums if you want to learn more information, if you need some help supporting esports through your brand. We're happy to help. And then if anybody wants to reach out to me directly, it's cbuckner@mainline.gg. They can reach me there.
Absolutely. And my last question is, our audience here is mostly individual investors at Seven Investing. You live this industry every single day. I mean, what do you think there are a couple of things that we should be watching to kind of keep up with how esports is evolving out there?
Well, this is going to sound like I'm being selfish and self-serving, but I'm not. A consolidation event in amateur esports is coming. I mean, it is, because what's happening is people are starting to see, oh, wow, once you start having some continuity in the space, there's real opportunity for really, really quick growth on top of the quick growth that we have. So I think the amateur esports space, and I call it amateur, I get beat up about that. I mean everything below professional. So semi-pro, collegiate, high school, middle school, this whole path to pro model that could be happening, the ability for all the data to be aggregated in one location. I think that's something to keep an eye on. Another thing, these OTT deals with YouTube gaming, Facebook gaming, obviously Twitch, stats. So right now, a lot of these publishers don't have APIs for automated stat sharing. So there's companies out there that do scraping, which some people can say, well, it's frowned upon because that's not technically the publisher's API. But there's some interesting stuff. And then another really big one that we're working on right now is just the marketing on top of this. So in order for Mainline to have stayed Switzerland along the way, we did not offer marketing in our kind of like offering because we're partnered with everybody. We don't want one partner seeing that one event went really well over here and going, hey, how come you didn't market our event better, or whatever it might be. But marketing right now is actually a really exciting industry in the esports space. And then from an individual perspective, I tell every person that wants to get into esports, young or old, get into business development for esports, and you can make a ridiculous amount of money, especially if you have experience with big brands, non-endemic big brands. I mean, some of the most ridiculous salaries you've seen in your life are in the, that marketing, sales, business development space in esports, because if you're competent to talk to non-endemic brands and you can sell the story, I mean, they're looking for placement in esports. So hopefully I answered that one okay as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Consolidation and continuity in the amateur esports leagues. I wrote down an aggregation of data and a lot of the statistics and other things, really, and opening opportunities for marketing and business development for anybody who wants to follow the industry.
That's right. Yep. You bet.
Well, great. Well, thanks very much to Chris Buckner. Chris, I really appreciate your time. Thanks for being with our 7 Investing podcast this afternoon.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. And I look forward to do this again to catch up.
Absolutely. And for anyone else who wants to learn more about Mainline, you can check out their website, mainline.gg, based down here in Houston, Texas. Really exciting opportunity as esports continues to evolve. We appreciate you tuning into this episode of our 7 Investing podcast. Once again, we are here to empower you to invest in your future. We are 7 Investing.